Emma stepped out of her truck, letting the door shut softly behind her. She didn't glance at Karen, didn't acknowledge the other two HOA members now whispering near the edge of her property line like vultures on a fence. Instead, she calmly unlatched the back gate to the trailer, letting her second horse, Valor, walk down the ramp. His hooves clacked against the metal before settling onto the soft earth. Tail flicking in the breeze like a flag, Valor tossed his head as though sensing the tension radiating from the other yard. She stroked his neck and whispered, "We've dealt with worse, haven't we?" From across the street, Karen took a few deliberate steps closer to the property. She stopped just before the easement line, heels planted, arms folded again. "That's two now," she called out, voice carrying in the still air. "Not planning on building a barn, are you? You'll need architectural approval." Emma met her gaze, the slightest smile playing on her lips. "Thanks for the warm welcome. But no, I don't need approval for what's already standing." Karen blinked. Her eyes darted toward the back of Emma's house, where a sturdy cedar stable had already been built, permitted, inspected, and standing long before the ink dried on Emma's purchase. "I see," Karen said flatly, then pivoted, without another word, and stalked back across the street, heels stabbing into the manicured grass of her lawn. That night, Emma reviewed the documents she'd collected from the recorder's office again, this time spreading them out on her kitchen table under the soft glow of pendant lights. The trail was real, the ownership was valid. No HOA rules applied to it because it wasn't common area, and it had never been subject to HOA maintenance or control. She traced her finger over the faded map, following the curving lines of the trail as it wound past the woods, through a narrow pass near the creek, and all the way to the other side of the county line. She remembered riding those very trails as a child, her grandfather beside her, teaching her how to read the trees and trust a horse's instincts over her own. She'd thought they were long gone swallowed up by suburban development, but they hadn't been lost. They'd just been sleeping, and now, they were hers. A knock jolted her from the memory. It was sharp and impatient. Emma opened the door to find another envelope on her porch, this one red-lettered. Second notice, HOA compliance demand. No signature, no plaza. Just a single paragraph now demanding immediate removal of all equine animals, due to clear violation of community aesthetic standards and neighborhood harmony. Emma didn't laugh. She didn't crumple the letter. She simply placed it on the counter next to the trail deed, letting the two documents sit side by side, one full of threats, the other full of rights. Tomorrow, she decided, she'd make some calls. Maybe to a land use attorney, maybe to the local equestrian club, because Karen hadn't just picked the wrong neighbor to intimidate. She'd declared war on the one person who held the keys to everything Karen didn't understand and didn't control. Karen Dilling had a particular way of walking when she was angry. Chin up, arms stiff at her sides, and a little too fast for her Yorkshire Terrier, Muffin, to keep up on her rhinestone-studded leash. Emma watched from her porch as Karen marched past her fence line that morning, head swinging like a periscope. Muffin yipped and tripped behind her, dragged more than walked. Emma sipped her coffee slowly, one hand resting on the worn wood rail, the other holding her phone. She wasn't recording, but she wanted Karen to think she might be. It was amazing how polite people became when they thought there was evidence. Karen stopped short in front of Emma's paddock. One of the Frisian's knight lifted his head, curiously, and let out a deep, velvety snort. "Still here?" Karen called. "I assumed you'd have complied by now." Emma set her mug down. "I assumed you'd have read the county's zoning page by now." Karen's lips pinched into a tight smile, the kind that made her look like she'd just bitten into something sour and couldn't spit it out. "Zoning isn't the issue. Harmony is. This neighborhood is not zoned for rural life. It's a community. We have standards, clean lines, no barn stench or hoofprints ruining the trails. This isn't some dusty ranch town." Emma descended the steps of her porch, her boots clicking in slow, deliberate taps. She walked right up to the fence line, where Karen stood and held out a sheet of paper. It was a copy of the original 1973 DH, the one marking ownership of the equestrian trail from end to end. Karen glanced at it, eyes narrowing. "What's this?" "Proof you're barking up the wrong tree," Emma said. "This trail you're so eager to keep clean doesn't belong to the HOA. It never has. It belongs to me. Has since last year, when my grandfather passed and willed it to me." Karen gave a short, scoffing laugh. "Ridiculous. You're welcome to verify with the county." "I already did." There was a twitch in Karen's eye, a calculation happening. She wasn't used to resistance, especially not from new residents, especially not from ones who hadn't bothered to show up at her precious beautification committee meeting the week before. "I'm sure the board will want to review this," she said stiffly. "You may have inherited something, but property rights don't override community consensus. We'll see how the rest of the HOA feels about living next to a stable." Emma tilted her head. "Funny, you all thought that trail was public, used it like it was yours. You might want to ask the rest of the HOA how they feel about possibly trespassing." That landed like a slap. Karen said nothing else, just gave her leash a hard tug, jerking poor Muffin into a run. and stomped off toward her pristine white colonial with its matching flower boxes, and blessed this home plaque hanging by the door. By lunchtime, Emma had already received 3 texts from neighbors she hadn't even met yet. Word had traveled fast. One was from a woman named Lynn down the street. "Hey, I heard about Karen. If you ever need help grooming the horses, I used to ride dressage." Another simply said, "Team horse." That night, Emma took a ride along the trail, just as the sun dipped behind the trees. The woods were quiet, the air golden with the last breath of daylight. As Knight's hooves pressed into the long-forgotten trail, Emma realized something else Karen hadn't yet figured out. This wasn't just about horses anymore. This was about territory. And Karen had just trespassed into the wrong warpath. Emma didn't expect to be ambushed while checking her mailbox, but there it was, an embossed envelope. Slipped into her box by hand and not the postal service. No return address, just gold foil letters across the front that read, Briar Glen, HOA Urgent Committee Action Requested. Inside, a single sheet of paper bore the announcement. An emergency HOA meeting has been called to address ongoing violations impacting community cohesion and neighborhood aesthetics. Your attendance is expected. Double quotes, expected, no request, no RSVP, just an order wrapped in pacification. Emma scanned the fine print. The meeting would take place the following evening at 7 p.m. in the Briar Glen clubhouse just 2 blocks down from her own property. She tucked the paper into her back pocket with a quiet sigh and looked out toward the paddock. Knight flicked his tail lazily as Valor nudged a hanging hay net, entirely unconcerned. "Well, boys," she muttered, "looks like we're going to a party." The clubhouse looked like something out of a wedding catalog, gleaming white siding, lantern lights glowing softly beneath the porch, everything overly manicured and overly sterile. Inside, folding chairs were arranged in a half circle. A few residents sat murmuring, but as Emma stepped in, the chatter fell off like a dropped curtain. Karen stood at the front, behind a podium she clearly brought herself. She wore a navy blue pantsuit and a string of pearls, so tight it looked like it might pop off if she raised her voice too high. "Ah," Karen said, her smile brittle. "Miss Caldwell, thank you for joining us." Emma folded her arms and leaned against the wall, staying just inside the door. "Wouldn't miss it." Karen turned to address the room. "Neighbors, I've called this emergency session because we face a growing issue, one that threatens the very spirit of Briar Glen. We are a community rooted in unity and civility, yet we've recently encountered rural disruption, namely, large animals, odors, and property use that conflicts with our vision." A murmur of agreement, muted but audible, rose from a few in the room. A couple exchanged glances. Uncertain. Karen raised a hand. "Before we proceed, I want to present photographic documentation." She gestured toward a projector, and the lights dimmed. Onto the screen popped a picture of Knight relieving himself in the paddock. Emma raised her eyebrows. "Really? You're leading with horse poop?" Karen didn't flinch. "This is what our children see when they walk past. This is the seitan smell greeting every passerby. I think we can all agree this is not harmonious." She clicked to the next photo. Emma leading her horse along the trail, framed from a distance by trees. "And this," Karen continued, "is the trail that runs behind our homes. Ms. Caldwell has claimed ownership, but until recently, we all used it, shared it. She now asserts we are trespassing, that we're forbidden." Emma straightened. "Because you are. The land's been in my family for decades. I own the trail. You don't get to vote on someone else's deed." Karen's jaw tightened. "Ownership doesn't entitle someone to disrupt the character of the neighborhood." Emma stepped forward now.com/controlled, but her voice had the steadiness of someone who knew she wasn't bluffing. "And your authority doesn't entitle you to weaponize rules that don't apply. My property is within zoning regulations. My horses are permitted, and that trail," she paused, letting the silence thicken. "That trail is mine. You've all been trespassing for years without knowing it. I've chosen not to enforce it yet." Gasps scattered the room like sparks. Karen looked stunned, momentarily frozen, her grip on the podium tightening. Emma offered a small smile. "But that can change." Outside, as the meeting broke up in a flurry of whispered disbelief, one elderly man approached Emma. He looked hesitant, then offered a hand. "Used to ride that trail when I was a kid," he said softly. "Never knew who it belonged to. I'm glad it's you." Emma shook his hand, nodded once, and turned toward the night. Let Karen call more meetings. Let her throw more tantrums. This was her trail now, and Karen had just run out of rope. The morning after the HOA meeting, Emma found the fence torn open, not just damaged. A 10-foot section of the electric tape fencing had been slashed straight through, and the warning signs she'd posted about hot wire "Do not touch" had been ripped off and thrown into the brush. One of the gate latches was broken clean off, like someone had tried to force it in the night. Valor stood near the opening, looking agitated, ears back and nostrils flared. Knight wasn't visible at all. Emma's stomach dropped. She whistled sharply, calling into the tree line. A minute later, Knight came trotting from the woods, tail high, bristling with nervous energy. His flank had a shallow scrape, likely from brushing up against a tree or shrub in the dark. Easy, she murmured, running a hand down his side. It's okay, boy, you're safe. But she knew what this was. This wasn't a coincidence, or the work of some bored teenagers. This was deliberate. It reeked of frustration, of retaliation, and she could guess exactly where that rage had come from. By noon, a deputy sheriff was walking the perimeter with her. He knelt near the broken post and picked up a discarded piece of tape. You've got cameras? He asked. Trail cams. Out on the far edges. I checked them already. Nothing. Caught this spot. Whoever did it knew where the blind zone was. The deputy nodded. Still worth filing a report, even if we can't prove intent. This is criminal mischief. You get any more trouble, call me direct. Emma took his card and thanked him. He paused before climbing back into his cruiser. For what it's worth, he said. I've had 3 other complaints about that HOA board this year. Most folks just back down and move. Emma's eyes hardened. I'm not. Most folks stop by sunset. The fence was repaired. Reinforced. She installed 2 more cameras and a solar-powered floodlight near the trail gate. No more blind spots. No more games. But Karen wasn't done. 2 days later, Emma received another letter. This one wasn't from the HOA, it was from the County Animal Control Office. A formal request to investigate possible livestock mistreatment and improper containment. Emma stared at the letter in disbelief. The wording was eerily precise, designed to trigger an inspection. She called the number on the form and spoke to the assigned officer, a woman named Hartley. I'm not accusing you of anything, Hartley said calmly, but we did receive a formal complaint. We'll need to do a basic welfare check and make sure your animals are secure. You're welcome to come, Emma said, jaw tight, but you'll find the only thing improper is the woman harassing me. Hartley came the next morning. She walked the paddock, took notes, checked the hay bins and inspected the water troughs. She even met Knight and Valor, both of whom leaned into her touch and nickered softly like children recognizing kindness. After 45 minutes, she looked up. They're in excellent condition, clean, fed, well-groomed. Your fencing is solid. Now, 2. Whoever filed that complaint either doesn't know what they're talking about, or they're trying to make your life difficult. Emma nodded grimly. I know exactly which it is. As Hartley left, she handed Emma a copy of her clean report and a side comment. Be careful, she said. Some people escalate when they realize you're not afraid of them. That night, Emma didn't sleep. She stood on her back porch with a flashlight and a thermos of coffee, watching the tree line, listening, waiting, because if someone came, again, they wouldn't find a passive homeowner. They'd find a woman defending not just her land, but her legacy. The signs went up overnight, bright yellow laminated boards, staked at even intervals along the Equestrian Trail. Private property trail used by permission. Only unauthorized use will be considered trespassing. Property owner. Called. Hammered in the last sign at the eastern edge of the trail, near the point where the Briar Glen neighborhood spilled into the old wooded stretch that hadn't been developed yet. She wasn't trying to be cruel. She was drawing a line. If the HOA board didn't respect boundaries, then boundaries would be enforced, legally and visibly. And then she made the second move. She posted a flyer at the local feed store, emailed the County Equestrian Club, and invited riders from neighboring towns to a charity trail ride event that would follow the full length of the trail from her paddock to the forested ridge and back again. Entry was free. All proceeds from on-site donations would go to a local horse rescue. She called it Ride for the Ridge. Within 24 hours, the flyer had spread like wildfire. By the weekend, the quiet cul-de-sac of Briar Glen looked like a miniature rodeo. Horse trailers lined the curb. Riders in helmets and boots unloaded gear, chatting in excited tones. Parents helped their children saddle ponies, while older women groomed, towering warm bloods and Arabians. The air was thick with the sounds of laughter, whinnies, and the satisfying clink of metal on leather. Emma stood near the gate, clipboard in hand, greeting each rider as they checked in. Every smile, every handshake was a reminder that the trail wasn't just hers. It was a lifeline to something bigger, something Karen would never understand. But Karen wasn't hiding. She stood on her porch with binoculars, muffin quivering under her arm like a purse accessory on the verge of a breakdown. Her husband, a quiet man rarely seen, appeared in the background and quickly retreated. Emma caught her watching. She raised her water bottle and a mock toast. Karen yanked her blinds shut. At noon, Emma mounted Knight and led the first group of riders onto the trail. The line of horses stretched behind her like a parade dozen strong. Hooves thudded softly. On the dirt path, riders laughing and waving to the occasional spectator who appeared along the edges of the woods. Someone from the Briar Glen Bulletin Facebook group live-streamed the event. Then a reporter from the local news station showed up, drawn by the sheer size of the crowd. Are you the organizer? The young journalist asked Emma as she dismounted at the halfway rest station. I am, she said, brushing dust from her gloves. We're raising money for a good cause and enjoying a piece of land that's been in my family for generations. It's private property, but I wanted to share it the right way, with permission. The reporter blinked, clearly catching the impetus. We've heard rumors there's been conflict with the Emma smiled but said nothing. Knight tossed his head behind her, almost on cue, and a ripple of laughter passed through the crowd. That evening, as trailers packed up and riders said their goodbyes, Emma stood beneath a streaked pink sky and watched the last horse vanish into the horizon. On her doorstep was another envelope, white, no return address. Inside was a single sentence, typed in bold, "You're going to regret this." There was no signature. Emma turned on her heel and walked back into her house. Unbothered, she'd just shown the world who owned the trail, and someone in Briar Glen wasn't taking it well. The note didn't leave. Emma shaken, but it did leave her alert. She had lived long enough around horses and people to know that a threat wasn't always barked in broad daylight. Sometimes it whispered through broken things, waited in the quiet, and struck from behind, so she watched. She checked locks twice. Cameras were running, floodlights were tested, and her phone stayed on her hip like a sidearm. For 2 days, nothing happened. Then, on the third morning, Knight refused to leave his stall. He wasn't limping. He wasn't sick, but he was trembling. His eyes were wide, fixed on something behind Emma as she opened the half door. When she turned, she saw nothing. She scanned the paddock. No fence breaches, no tire tracks, no signs of forced entry. But something had disturbed him deeply, and later that afternoon, she found it behind the hay shed, tucked where no one would. Casually look was a bag of pelleted feed that didn't belong to her, open half spilled. Emma's heart froze. She didn't use pellet feed. She used a custom blend from a local supplier, and this bag, it wasn't local. It was a generic bulk Brandon. It smelled wrong. She took a photo, bagged some of the spilled pellets in a Ziploc, and stored the whole thing in her garage fridge. Then she drove straight to the vet. "I need to know if this was tampered with," she told the tech. "Laced with anything, mold, sedatives, toxins, anything." The vet promised to call back within 24 hours. That night, Emma slept lightly, boots by her bed and her phone on loud. The paddock lights flickered once around 2:13 a.m. brief, like a blink hand, then came back on. When she checked the security footage, she caught a single frame, a hooded figure by the fence line, too far to identify, but unmistakably real. She called the sheriff again. This time, it wasn't just about vandalism. "This is escalating," she told him, "and someone could be trying to hurt my horses." The deputy took the footage, the feed bag, and the timing seriously. He promised to increase patrols around Briar Glen and advised Emma to install motion alarms. But when she mentioned who I suspected, his tone shifted. "Karen Dilling's name has come up before," he said carefully. "Never caught doing anything directly, but complaints like this, they follow her like smoke." Emma nodded. "Well, I'm ready to light the fire." The vet called the next morning. "There's ivermectin in the feed," she said. "In concentrated amounts, too much for a horse. It would have caused neurological distress, possibly seizures. If one of them ate a full scoop," Emma exhaled hard, "they'd have died." Silence stretched between them. "You're lucky," the vet said quietly. Emma looked out at her paddock. Knight and Valor stood calmly near the back fence, unaware of the quiet war being waged around them. "I don't think it's luck anymore," Emma replied. "I think it's instinct." That afternoon, a knock came at her door. When Emma opened it, she found a teen boy with a mop of curly hair and nervous eyes. He held a flyer in one hand, "Ride for the Ridge End" shuffled from foot. 2 foot. "I think I need to tell you something," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "It's about what happened. About my mom." Emma stared at him. "Your mom is Karen," he said. Barely a whisper. "She told me to put feed behind your barn. She said it was harmless. Said it would keep the horses docile. But I didn't know, I swear. I didn't know it could hurt them." Emma stepped outside slowly, her eyes never leaving his. And just like that, the war became personal, because now she had a witness. And Karen had just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. The boy's name was Matthew. 16, skittish and pale as the winter sky. He sat at Emma's kitchen table, a mug of cocoa trembling slightly in his hands as she gently pressed for details. She said the feed would calm them. He muttered, eyes fixed on the table, said it was just temporary, that your horses were too much for a neighborhood like this. She was ranting after that charity ride, said you were showing off. Emma didn't interrupt. She let him talk. She gave me the bag and told me to dump it where they'd find it. He continued, I didn't think it was dangerous, I swear, but then I saw your lights come on in the middle of the night, and the way she laughed, I knew something was wrong. Matthew reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I took pictures, the label on the bag, and this. He showed Emma a photo of Karen standing beside their garage, holding the same bag of feed, grinning like a politician. Another showed her pointing at the back fence, gesturing with that same sharp finger she'd used to scold neighbors for leaving bins out too long. Emma leaned back in her chair, the photo freezing her blood and fueling her resolve at once. Can I have copies? She asked. Matthew nodded. And are you willing to tell someone else this? He hesitated, but then gave the smallest, most decisive nod she'd seen all night. By noon, Emma was sitting across from Deputy Harrow at the sheriff's office, Matthew beside her. The teen gave his statement under oath, presented the photos, and confirmed that the feed had come from his mother. When he was done, Harrow leaned back and whistled low. This is more than harassment now. If the vet's test checks out, we're talking criminal negligence at the very least, possibly attempted animal cruelty. Emma's jaw clenched. It was sabotage. She targeted my horses. What's next? Poisoning water buckets, setting the barn on fire. We'll handle it from here, Harrow promised. But I'll warn you, people like her, they don't go down quietly. Emma gave a tight smile. Neither do I. That evening, a squad car parked near Karen's driveway. Neighbors peeked through their blinds as Harrow and another officer knocked on the Dilling front door. Emma watched from her porch as Karen opened it, all polite confusion until she spotted Harrow and Matthew. Her smile fell like a glass off a table. Muffled shouting followed. Karen's husband tried to intervene. Karen pointed furiously toward Emma's house. But in the end, the door shut behind the officers and Matthew. An investigation had officially begun. The next day, Emma filed a civil complaint: intentional sabotage, endangerment of livestock, and HOA harassment beyond the scope of board authority. Her lawyer filed it in the county courthouse by noon, and by 2, it was public record. Karen hadn't just picked a fight. She'd opened the gates to a legal reckoning, but it didn't stop there. Later that night, Emma was brushing night when headlights swept across the paddock. A car idled at the end of her driveway. She walked out slowly, flashlight in hand. The car door opened. It wasn't Karen. It was 2 members of the HOA board, Leela Brennan and Andrew Chan. Both looked deeply uncomfortable. We wouldn't know how far she'd gone, Leela said. We thought you should know. She forged 2 letters. The animal control complaint and a sanitation citation. Both were fake. Emma said nothing. She's been lying to the board too, Andrew added, and we've had enough. Lila took a breath. We're holding a vote. Emergency recall. Tomorrow night we think it'll pass. Emma's grip tightened on the flashlight. Karen was falling, and she didn't even know the ground was gone beneath her feet. The night air buzzed with tension as neighbors gathered in the Briar Glen clubhouse one last time. Emma stood near the entrance, feeling the weight of every pair of eyes, some wary, some hopeful, many tired. The once imposing presence of Karen Dilling was absent. The chair where she'd dominated meetings, now vacant. A silent testament to the battle, fought and nearly won. Lila Brennan stepped up to the podium, her voice steady, but filled with the fatigue of months of conflict. Thank you all for coming. Tonight, we vote on the recall of the HOA president, Karen Dilling. For conduct unbecoming of her office, and for actions damaging to the community. A murmur rippled through the crowd, some nodding, others crossing arms, waiting for the inevitable. Emma's phone vibrated. A text from Andrew, voting overwhelming. We've got this. She pocketed the phone, her pulse quickening. Then, the doors swung open. Karen appeared, face pale but defiant, flanked by 2 loyalists. She strode to the podium with the practiced confidence of someone used to power, her voice raised to command attention. I've done nothing wrong, she declared. This community has been compromised by one person's selfish claims. This trail, these horses are a threat to our property values and peace. I will not allow Briar Glen to become a rural backwater. But the room was ready. Several homeowners stood, voices raised in protest. Karen, you forged complaints. One woman shouted. You endangered animals, called another. Karen's mouth twitched. Lies. She spat. But the momentum was gone. Lila held up a letter from the county prosecutor's office. Charges have been filed against Ms. Dilling for animal cruelty and fraud. This community deserves leadership, not lies and sabotage. With a heavy sigh, Karen's shoulders slumped. The vote was cast. The recall passed by an overwhelming majority. Outside, as the crowd dispersed under the silver light of a rising moon, Emma felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Matthew. I'm sorry for everything, he said quietly. I just wanted to do what my mom told me. Emma smiled gently. You did the right thing by telling the truth. Weeks later, the first official sign went up at the trailhead. Briar Glen Equestrian Preserve privately. Owned by Emma Caldwell. Emma stood nearby as riders arrived from all over the county. Children on ponies, seasoned equestrians, families with laughter spilling into the breeze. The trail was alive again. No fences broken, no threats, just freedom owned, protected, and shared. From the sidelines, Emma caught a glimpse of a moving truck pulling away from Karen's house. Her victory wasn't just legal, it was personal. Karen had tried to ban the horses, thinking she owned the land and the neighborhood's soul. But Emma owned the trail and with it, the last word.